Welcome in, guys. Adam here. Good to see you all, and thank you for tuning in to another drum lesson. So today we're learning a pretty slick 16th note fill. It is mostly in 16th notes, but there is a moment where we sort of blast into 32nd notes. That's that Herta sort of thing happening in beat 1. And there's some interesting phrasing choices going on here as well. So we're going to explore all of that stuff today. All right, so this is not quite as hard as it sounds, but it does require a lot of intention, right? You really have to slam into some of these accents to make this thing feel right. If we sort of take all the dynamic levels and smooth them out, if you don't dig into the accented notes or just the notes that are supposed to be loud within this fill, if you don't dig into them, and everything gets sort of dynamically smoothed out, I promise this is not going to pack the same punch. So it is really important that the loud notes are very loud and the quiet notes are very quiet. And hopefully you'll see what I mean as we get a little further into this lesson. Now, I probably shouldn't be talking about dynamics because we have a pattern to learn here and some interesting phrasing choices. So let's get into that. So starting out inside of beat 1, we have a kick drum on the downbeat of 1. That is a 16th note. But we immediately launch into a Herta, which is the next 4 notes that you can see inside of beat 1. Right, left, right, left. And the way we're playing this Herta is kind of interesting because it takes us over top of the beat line. The real pattern we want to see are the first 5 notes with the hands. Right, left, left. This is what we would call a Herta 4. If you're unfamiliar with how we sort of count and phrase with Hertas, definitely check out the Herta 101 and 102 masterclass. I promise there's a really good explanation there of how we can use Hertas to phrase within 16th note fills, even though they're not 16th notes. Trust me, Herta 101 and Herta 102 masterclass, watch those if this is at all confusing. But assuming you know what the Herta is and how we can fit it in here, it's basically a 4-note pattern that begins on the E of beat 1. So we have right, left, that takes up 1 note in the 16th note world, right? Then we have right, left, and that takes us over top of the beat line. Now what's interesting about how we're orchestrating this is that the right, left, the 32nd notes of the Herta, those go up to a closed hi-hat, and you're going to shoot that right hand off, the next right hand that falls on the and, or the upbeat of beat 1. That's going to go to your rack tom, nice and loud. Then we have our left hand diddle that takes us from the of beat 1 to the downbeat of 2. I know that's a mouthful, but let's just play until the downbeat of 2. So we're basically playing the kick drum on the downbeat of 1. Then we have right, left, left. And we're going to make sure to nail that 32nd note phrasing, as well as shooting that right hand off the hats over to the rack tom. Enough talking. Here's the first kick and then the 5 hands. The thing about the Herta is that it's not a difficult pattern to play, right? Playing right, left is not a tough pattern at all. You could probably find that in 100 other lessons on the site. The challenge is really nailing that subdivision change because not all of these notes are equally spaced. So it's a bit of a mind trip the first few times that you try and understand what makes a Herta. That subdivision change is built into the pattern itself. So nailing that at higher speeds can be a little bit tough, just something to keep in mind if you have not encountered the Herta before. But either way, that's what's happening in beat 1. It takes us into beat 2, and then from the E of 2, where we have that kick drum, all the way until the end of the groove, we're basically just looking at a pretty standard linear pattern. Now I say standard because it's just linear, right? It's all one note at a time, but the way we're phrasing this is pretty interesting. So we have that kick drum, then I want you to look at the next 5 notes. Right, left, left. We're gonna think of that as a 5-note grouping, and then a kick drum after that. So we have like It's a pattern of 7, but it's basically a kick drum, a 5-note pattern. That's how I want you to think of it in your mind, and then a kick drum. So we have a 5-note grouping sandwiched by kick drums. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, we don't need to isolate that pattern because it's going to sound ridiculous outside of the context of this fill, but we should talk about the 5-note grouping in the middle here of this kick sandwich and talk about the orchestration that's happening. So we're only moving the right hands. Those left hands there can stay ghosted on the snare. But when it comes to the right hands, that first right hand that's on the upbeat of beat 2, that's going to be nice and loud on your snare drum. And then the next time we play it, which is on the downbeat of 3, it goes over to your floor tom. So just isolating those 5 notes for showing you guys the orchestration, we would have this. Again, super important that you dig into those accented notes. I promise if we leveled out all of these volumes, it just doesn't sound the same. So really punchy here in this 5-note grouping. Make sure to really dig in on that snare and dig in on that floor tom and try and draw back those ghost notes. Make them super quiet, especially in this section. Now, once we have our kick drum, 5-note grouping, another kick drum, that's our whole sandwich situation in the middle of this fill. At the end, we're doing the easiest escape of a fill ever, just a standard walk down the kit in 16th notes. Right on the snare, left on the rack tom, right, left, down on the floor tom, this guy. Now, the tough thing about teaching a fill like this is that there is no magic trick to help you hear and understand the phrasing that's happening. You know, I can break down the math all day, but when it comes down to it, you just have to try connecting these patterns for yourself and seeing if you can make all of this feel right? Taking that Herta in the beginning, and then we're going into this weird kick sandwich 5-note grouping thing, and then we have our walk down at the end. There's nothing I could tell you or explain to you that's going to make all of these sit next to each other in time and feel correct. It's just a matter of learning each pattern individually, making sure that you don't have any weak spots in the fill, right? So if you can individually play all of those patterns, you get them all down. Connecting them is weirdly one of the hardest things you have to do, and it's also one of the hardest things to teach as well. So what I think I can do for you that's going to be the most helpful is just slow this down as much as humanly possible, but also remember that when we take more complex phrasings like this and we slow them all the way down, what ends up happening is that we kind of take the musicality out of it, right? It's a little bit more robotic, and it's hard to hear what this is supposed to sound like because it sounds good when it's fast, right? That's its home tempo. That's where it feels most natural to me, is a little bit faster. So as we take that speed away, bring it nice and slow, it's not going to sound as musical, but that's when you really just want to soak up the pattern and sort of follow along each note as it passes. So I'm going to play this at 3 speeds for you. We're going to take it as slow as I can get away with, nice medium practice tempo, and then I will crank this thing because Hertas sound super dope when you crank them real fast. All right, guys, let's give it a shot. Here we go.